So for our last location of the term, the sunny climes of Prestonfield House Hotel with our model Hope, I thought it might be nice to try some new approaches, and I'm going to guide you in as far as I'm able in working with watercolour and pencil. So I've just been practicing. I'll have some watercolour sets for you, a little like this, and I will encourage you to begin with some drawing, some pencil drawing. I'm just working really with an outline. I have some photographs from a previous trip. And the pencil outline is obviously going to be a guide for where I apply colour, but it's also going to be part of the final image. Watercolour is obviously a great kind of practical medium to be able to take outdoors. It's lovely for the way in which it can capture light, you know, the luminous quality of the paint on the white paper. But working in this way, on the sort of scale we're going to work, there won't necessarily be a lot of detail. I'm starting with the figure, hoping that everything ends up in the right place. And then I'm going to apply, having put down some lines, and you can see it's virtually a continuous line. Having put down some lines, I'm then going to apply different colours, which I'll have to mix. These palettes have got, this one's got about 10 different pans. So I'm going to have to mix quite a few colours, and I will be creating some of the form, some of the pattern of light and shade. I'll be creating it according to the colours that I mix, but also perhaps on the basis of some of the negative shapes around my figure. So I think I'll focus on the figure for this demonstration. And when we're in Prestonfield House Hotel Gardens, I'll be encouraging you to work with the figure and also something of the setting. I think if the weather is the way we'd like it to be, then you'll hopefully be able to work with light and shade, sunshine and shadow. And that's how I'm going to approach the watercolour technique. So I'm actually going to start with the figure. So this is my pan. It's not my pan, it's my watercolour set. These are pans, I think. And I'm not, as I've said, particularly expert on watercolour, but I do like the speed and the luminous quality of the paint. And my approach, I understand this is one of the ways to work, is to wet the pans first and then make some mixtures in these palettes, and to start with maybe some of the brighter mixtures, so kind of working from light to shadow, or light to dark rather. And I'm going to be leaving areas of white paper, certainly initially, for the lightest parts of my subject. So I've made a kind of orange and sienna mixture there for some of the slightly darker parts of Hope's head and arms. And now I shall try a different mixture of sienna and it's probably a burnt umber to get in some of her dark hair. And because the paint is still wet, I am going to avoid edges touching each other at the moment. Oh, too late, because I don't particularly want the paint to bleed. Not for this, in this particular instance, I'm using the dark hair to define parts of the face. So I might come back to that if I need to get a bit closer, which I do, if I want to make a nose stand out. And then let's have a look at maybe the dress. And there are some bright parts to this dress, which I'll just leave white paper. And the less bright parts, I shall still stay with a fairly bright blue. So I've started with the figure, and I'm then going to apply some negative shapes around the figure to continue to define that figure. But as I say, I'm starting with the brighter colour, and then if I do make some shadow colours, and that was I think that's a cobalt blue, and I've mixed it again with some of the umber to make some darker mixtures. And you can really start to see how with watercolour, because I'm working on the white paper and I'm keeping some of the white as part of my final colour scheme, it's when I apply the shadow mixtures, it's then that things really start to become more defined or make more sense. So there's this business of working from dark to light. I think that's the watercolour way. It does require a certain amount of, patience or trust that it'll all come together. But it's also not a bad way of helping you look at your subject differently. So you've got to, it's like those drawing exercises where you have to start by not drawing any lines. You can only use shapes. So this is really helping me see shapes and paint shapes, and helping me identify what shapes are important, significant, and what shapes aren't. So that's a bit of the bench. It's a kind of baskety thing. So I don't want to have too much white there. I'll get a little bit of thinner paint in between. And then I'll get something maybe behind this head. Again, I'm mixing a lot of brown with these different colours. So there's a really nice dramatic dark green in the hedge behind Hope. So I'm getting that on. But what's really lovely with watercolour, as I say, this more sort of luminous quality, that even though you're painting a dark, it's going onto a white paper, and therefore, has a kind of light quality to it. So this takes a bit of time. We tend to have shorter poses, and the materials I often provide you with are generally quite quick to work with. We'll still have fairly short poses, And I'll get you to work on the sort of scale that I'm working on. This is sort of A4. And I think, as I say, we'll probably still have relatively quick poses, partly so you can just get a little bit more used to the medium. And if you can go through a few of these stages to identify colours and also to become more familiar with the way you use the medium, then I think that will be a better process. So nearly there with covering most of my painting. And then I would go back. I mean, potentially I could even go back with a pencil and do a certain amount of adding line if necessary. But what I'm wanting to see now is just how much white I can leave. Because some of these areas that I've left white, I can still fill in, or I can still add to, but it's just observing really how some of these shadows work. And I think I would probably deepen some shadows, actually. I do a bit of both. I think, for example, Hope's arms and collar area, maybe a little bit more colour on there, slightly thinner, and maybe I want to just lift that edge a little bit so that I haven't got such a sharp transition between light and shade. That's a bit better, and also I think getting a bit darker in certain places. So maybe parts of the dress. So we've got, I used a B pencil, and we've got some quite nice quality watercolour paper. So I think that will be a good combination. And as with, so many approaches to drawing and painting, it's a lot about the edges and how I control soft or hard edges. So that really is more or less what I want to demonstrate. As I say, there are some interesting things to do with colour as well, because there's a necessity to mix some of these colours, mixing them partly with the paper and partly in the palette. There can be some good, useful insights into mixing colour. And because I've darkened one or two places, as I'm showing you there, I might also return to my pencil. It could be there's one or two things, if the paper's dry, if I'm thinking of fingers and features, I could put back one or two of those lines as a final bit of definition. I didn't get to the shoes, so I need to give them some attention, and the feet. So there we are. That will be our subject and our approach to the materials. Working outdoors at Prestonfield House Hotel with a picnic theme and a model in the garden.